On a humid Tuesday afternoon, Daniel stood in his driveway, canvas tool bag in hand, next to a faded red coupe with peeling paint, a cracked side mirror, and rust creeping along the wheel wells like a slow tide. His neighbor Delilah stepped off her porch in a sharp red dress and heels that clicked against the pavement, and before he could finish the sentence, before he could even get the words "would you like to" out of his mouth, she cut him off with a laugh that carried clean down the block. She jabbed a finger straight at the car. "You honestly thought I'd go out with you? I wouldn't be caught dead sitting in a pathetic $1,000 piece of trash." Daniel's 7-year-old daughter Yvonne stood 2 feet behind him in her yellow sundress, squeezing her stuffed bunny so hard her knuckles went white. Daniel said nothing. He adjusted his glasses, looked at his daughter, and went to work. 7 days later, an European billionaire pulled up to that exact same driveway, dropped to one knee in front of the rusted coupe, and handed Daniel a wire transfer for $3 million. What was hiding underneath all that peeling red paint? Stay with this story, because what they found left every single person on that street completely speechless. Daniel Reeves had been waking up at 5:30 every morning for 3 years, not because of an alarm, but because that was when Yvonne padded down the hallway in her socks and climbed onto the foot of his bed, bunny tucked under one arm, hair wild from sleep, ready to talk about absolutely nothing and everything at once. He never complained. That 12-minute window before the day swallowed them both whole was the best part of his life. By 6, he was already dressed. Flannel shirt, worn jeans, steel-toed boots with the left sole separating at the toe. He'd wrap it with electrical tape every few days and keep moving. There wasn't much choice. The freelance mechanic work came in waves, a transmission job on Monday, a brake overhaul on Thursday, long dry stretches in between where he'd sharpen his tools and check his bank balance and tell himself the same quiet lie: "We're fine." The canvas tool bag went everywhere with him. It was olive green, stained with grease that no amount of dish soap could fully lift. One zipper replaced twice with hardware store parts. Inside it lived everything he knew how to do: wrenches, socket sets, a worn TalkSpec notebook, a small photo of Yvonne taped inside the front flap. He'd been carrying that same bag since his father pressed it into his hands the summer he turned 19 and said, "A man who knows how things work will never truly be helpless." He believed that. He had to. Yvonne believed in him too, completely, unquestioningly, the way only a 7-year-old can love a parent. She told her teacher her dad could fix anything. She wasn't wrong. The one thing Daniel had never figured out how to repair was the quiet ache of doing it all alone. Delilah Marsh had moved in 14 months ago with a moving truck full of furniture that cost more than Daniel made in a year. She was sharp-featured, dark-haired, and put together in a way that made the whole street feel slightly underdressed. She drove a leased luxury SUV she washed every Saturday morning, wore sunglasses indoors at the neighborhood block party, and had a habit of letting her eyes slide past people she considered beneath her notice. A long, practiced glance that landed nowhere and said everything. Daniel had noticed her the way a careful man notices something beautiful and slightly dangerous. He hadn't planned to do anything about it. But 3 weeks of small waves across the driveway had softened into brief conversations at the mailbox, and those conversations had felt, to him at least, like something. Enough to try. He chose a Tuesday afternoon. Yvonne was in the front yard with her bunny. The sky was overcast and smelled like rain. He walked across the lawn with his tool bag still in his hand because he'd come straight from a job and hadn't thought far enough ahead to set it down first. He got 4 words out. That was all it took for Delilah's expression to shift. Confusion first, then something colder. She looked at him. Then she looked past him at the faded red coupe sitting in the driveway, paint bubbling at the hood seams, rear quarter panel dented in like a slow exhale. And she laughed. Not a small laugh. A full, theatrical, carry-down-the-block laugh that brought her hand to her collarbone like she needed to steady herself. "You honestly thought I'd go out with you?" She pointed directly at the car, her voice sharpening into something that cut. "I wouldn't be caught dead in a pathetic $1,000 piece of trash." Yvonne stopped moving. She pulled the bunny tight against her chest and said nothing, her eyes fixed on her father's face, waiting to see if the world had just changed. He didn't watch Delilah walk back inside. He turned around, crouched down to Yvonne's level right there on the lawn, and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Her chin was trembling. She hadn't cried yet, but she was close, holding it together the way children do when they're trying to be brave for a parent who looks like they might need it. "Hey," he said quietly. "Look at me." She did. That woman looked at a car and decided it told her everything she needed to know about a person. He kept his voice even, unhurried. "But you know what mechanics know that most people don't." Yvonne shook her head. "The outside of something is just weather. It's just time. It doesn't tell you what's underneath." He tapped the center of her chest once, gently. "Real value lives in there. Always has." She leaned into him and he held her for a moment, one hand across her small shoulders, tool bag still hanging from the other. Down the street, a sprinkler kicked on. The afternoon went quiet. Later, after Yvonne was settled at the kitchen table with her crayons and a glass of juice, Daniel pulled the faded red coupe into the garage and closed the side door behind him. He didn't have a plan. He just needed something to do with his hands, something honest and absorbing that would crowd out the afternoon's humiliation and replace it with the only language he'd ever fully trusted. He set the canvas bag down, snapped on his work light, and popped the hood. What he expected was ordinary. A tired engine, worn belts, the unremarkable mechanical biography of a cheap old car. He leaned in close, pushed his glasses up, and went still. Something wasn't right. Something was very, very interesting. He didn't sleep that night. Not properly. He kept coming back to the engine block. The proportions were wrong for the chassis classification, the mounting geometry unfamiliar, the casting marks unlike anything in his American service manuals. He photographed everything with his phone, cross-referenced what he could online, and sat back on his garage stool at 2 a.m. with the particular stillness of a man who suspects he is standing at the edge of something large but can't yet see how far down it goes. By morning he had a theory. By afternoon he was testing it. He bought 3 cans of commercial-grade paint stripper from the hardware store, the kind with the ventilation warnings on the label, and started at the rear quarter panel, the section where the top coat was thinnest and most blistered. He applied the solvent in long, deliberate strokes, let it work, and began peeling back the layers with a plastic scraper. The first coat came off red. Amateur brushwork, inconsistent thickness, the kind of paint job done fast in someone's driveway with no primer and no patience. Beneath it was gray primer. Then older red beneath that, a different formula, finer grain. Then the scraper slowed. What emerged underneath was not steel. It was something lighter, with a surface texture that caught the garage light differently, a pale silver aluminum that felt almost warm under his fingertips. He tapped it twice. The resonance was wrong for standard sheet metal. Too clean, too deliberate. He pulled out his reference calipers and measured the panel thickness. His breath left him slowly. He moved to the door seam next, stripped a 6-inch section, and found it, stamped directly into the alloy in small, precise characters, still perfectly legible beneath 50 years of misdirection. A serial number. Italian. Hand-stamped. Daniel sat down on the concrete floor and stared at it for a long time. He photographed the serial number from 6 different angles, cleaned the surrounding alloy with a soft cloth to sharpen the stamping detail, and photographed it again. Then he carried his laptop into the garage, sat on the stool with a cold cup of coffee, and started pulling threads. The first 2 nights yielded fragments. Italian coach builder registries from the post-war era, digitized auction catalogs, a handful of academic papers on Grand Tourer prototypes that never reached production. His Italian was non-existent, so he worked through translation tools slowly, cross-checking terminology, building a vocabulary of chassis codes and coach builder nomenclature one term at a time. Yvonne found him asleep at the workbench Thursday morning with his glasses still on and a legal pad full of notes pressed under his forearm. The breakthrough came on the 3rd night. A Swiss automotive heritage archive, partially digitized, clearly underfunded, the kind of database maintained by one devoted archivist with too much knowledge and not enough bandwidth, contained a scanned exhibition catalog from Turin, 1967. Daniel's hands were steady as he scrolled. His heartbeat was not. There it was. A single prototype Grand Tourer, coach built by a small Milanese atelier that had folded before the decade ended. 1 chassis produced. Unveiled at the International Exhibition to significant critical attention. Then transported to a private buyer in the United States and never publicly documented again. The archive listed its status in plain, bureaucratic language that somehow carried the weight of a ghost story. Whereabouts unknown. Daniel looked up from the screen at the car sitting 10 feet away in his garage, its stripped panel gleaming under the work light, its serial number matching the catalog entry digit for digit. He exhaled once, long and slow. Then he picked up his phone and started taking the best photographs of his life. He spent 2 hours writing the post. Not because he was slow, but because he wanted to be precise. He had spent enough years being dismissed, by customers who doubted his estimates, by banks that declined his loan applications, by neighbors who looked at his driveway and made their calculations, to know that credibility was everything. 1 sloppy sentence and the forum would eat him alive. He laid it out methodically. The acquisition, the anomalous engine geometry, the panel composition, the solvent process, the alloy thickness measurements, the stamped serial number, and finally the Turin catalog entry with a side-by-side comparison image he'd assembled himself at the kitchen table after Yvonne went to bed. No sensational language. No claims he couldn't support. Just evidence, organized by a man who understood how things worked and trusted that the facts were extraordinary enough on their own. He posted it at 11:47 on a Thursday night and went to bed. By 6 the next morning there were over 200 replies. By noon the thread had been shared across 4 continents. Restoration specialists, museum curators, automotive historians, and retired racing journalists all arrived in sequence. Some to challenge, most to verify, a few who simply wrote variations of the same stunned sentence in different languages. A professor from Bologna confirmed the coach builder's hallmark alloy composition. A London auction house sent a private message within the hour requesting documentation. But one response arrived differently from the others. Not through the forum's messaging system. Through a personal email Daniel hadn't listed anywhere publicly, which meant someone with resources had gone looking. The message was 4 sentences long. Formal, direct, and signed with a name that Daniel had to search twice before he fully understood who he was dealing with. He read it standing in his garage, still in his work boots, and felt the floor shift slightly beneath him. It was exactly 1 week to the day. Daniel had told Yvonne only that some people were coming to look at the car. She had accepted this the way she accepted most things he told her. Completely, without requiring the larger architecture of why. She sat on the front step in her yellow sundress with her bunny in her lap, eating a piece of toast, watching the street with the patient curiosity of a child who has learned that her father's quiet moments sometimes precede remarkable ones. The transport vehicle arrived first. Long, matte black, the kind of vehicle that didn't announce itself with noise but with an absolute, unhurried certainty of presence. It parked in a way that suggested the driver had never once in his professional life worried about blocking a street. Behind it came two dark sedans. The doors opened and 5 men stepped out in charcoal and black suits. Not the boxy, off-the-rack kind, but the kind that moved with the person wearing them. 2 carried aluminum cases. One held a device Daniel recognized as a spectroscopic alloy analyzer, the same type he'd seen demonstrated once at a trade expo and never expected to encounter in his own driveway. They worked with the reverence of surgeons and the focus of men who had authenticated enough significant objects to know, within the first 90 seconds, exactly what they were standing in front of. Across the street, a curtain moved. Delilah stood at her front window, coffee cup motionless in her hand, watching the tableau with an expression that cycled slowly through confusion, recognition, and something she would not have named out loud. The film crew that had arrived with the 3rd sedan was setting up quietly on the lawn, their lenses aimed directly at the driveway she had once treated as a punchline. Nobody glanced in her direction. Not once. The billionaire stepped out last. He was older than Daniel had expected, mid-70s, silver-haired, with the unhurried bearing of a man who had long since stopped needing to impress anyone. He wore no tie. He walked directly to the car without greeting anyone, without looking at the cameras, without acknowledging the small suburban street around him as anything other than the precise coordinates where something he had spent years searching for had finally come to rest. He circled it once, ran 2 fingers along the stripped alloy panel, crouched at the rear quarter and examined the seam where decades of cheap paint had been peeled back to reveal the car's true bone structure. Then he stood, pressed his palm flat against the roof, and was quiet for a moment in the way that people are quiet when something moves them past the need for language. He looked at Daniel. "What do you want for it?" he said. Not a question. An opening. Daniel had a number prepared. He had written it on a piece of paper and folded it into his shirt pocket 3 days ago, taking it out occasionally to look at it and make sure it still felt real. He named it now, steadily, without apology. The billionaire nodded once and told his assistant to initiate the transfer. It was that simple. $3 million decided in 40 seconds between 2 men who both understood exactly what was standing in the driveway. The cameras were rolling when Delilah appeared, heels on, hair done, moving across the lawn with the bright manufactured warmth of someone who has abruptly revised their opinion of a situation. She aimed herself at Daniel with a wide smile and a laugh designed to suggest that the previous Tuesday had been some kind of mutual joke. The film crew didn't move their lenses. The billionaire's entourage continued working. Daniel looked at her for one quiet moment, then turned back to sign the paperwork. She stood on the lawn for a while with nowhere to direct the smile. The money cleared on a Wednesday morning. Daniel was making Yvonne's lunch when his phone buzzed with the bank notification. He read it twice, set the phone face down on the counter, and finished making her sandwich. Some things deserved to be done in the right order. The house came first. Not extravagant. Daniel had no interest in extravagance, but solid and warm, with a proper kitchen, a bedroom for Yvonne with enough wall space for every drawing she had ever made, and a backyard large enough that she could run the full length of it without stopping. She discovered this on the first afternoon and proceeded to do exactly that. Back and forth, bunny tucked under one arm, laughing at nothing in particular. Daniel stood on the back porch and watched her and felt something loosen in his chest that had been wound tight for 3 years. The restoration facility took 4 months to build. A proper workshop this time, a hydraulic lift, a full diagnostic bay, climate-controlled storage for finished vehicles, and his father's canvas tool bag hung on a hook by the entrance where he could see it from every workstation. He hired 2 apprentices from the local vocational program within the first week. The scholarship fund was Yvonne's idea. She had heard him on the phone one evening discussing the foundation paperwork and asked, with complete seriousness, if kids whose moms or dads were doing it alone could get help for school. He told her that was exactly the plan. She nodded and went back to her drawing like the matter was settled. Across the fence, the house with the luxury SUV in the driveway went quiet in the way that houses do when the person inside them has been left with too much space and not enough substance to fill it. Daniel didn't notice. He was already too far down the road. If this story moved you, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told your worth by someone who never bothered to look beneath the surface, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed so you never miss what comes next. Every week we bring you stories about ordinary people who quietly refused to let the world define them, and the extraordinary moments that proved them right. The next one is already waiting for you. Don't miss it.